we were talking about different topics that we could talk about for this week's episode, and one of the things that we had talked about was different staff members and managers, auxiliary support, just people in the program. And so, Ron, you said, hey, you thought this would be a good time to do it, and why don't you kind of lead the way on some things and some thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think it's a long-running tradition, at least it's been at Chaney, that, there's people involved in the program that offer tremendous support, and whether that be an assistant coach, and how we referred to it during my tenure was, coaches in general. I mean, I always kind of felt that, I know some coaches take an attitude that, I'm the head coach and, I have a group of assistants. And I think that we always looked at it as, we just coach together. Now, in saying that, certainly, the head coach gets a lot of blame for, most of the things that happen bad. And in general, the staff is responsible for the things that happen good. So, and that's just the way of the world. But starting with Coach McFee, it was him and Paul Shoemaker. I mean, that's who was the staff. Now, they considered the faculty manager, the athletic director, as part of that too. But Paul Shoemaker was with Chess from, I believe, 1926 to 1950. So it was those two coaching, and certainly Coach McFee was acknowledged, but Coach Shoemaker was acknowledged, brought into the Hall of Fame. I don't remember the date, but he is in the Chaney Hall of Fame, and his son accepted on his behalf posthumously. So that led to Red, who I do believe he helped Chess for a couple of years prior to becoming the head coach. I know he was certainly on faculty, and I'm pretty sure that he helped out as an assistant. And when he took over, it was him and John Pelusi and Gene Gianecco and John Dorenzo. And that was it pretty much until he brought Ed and Joe Lutzy in around the time that I was a player in the late 60s. And when we took over, I'm sorry, when Ed became the head coach, when Red retired and Ed became the head coach, there was him.
Hold on 1 second. There's something going on.
I didn't hear anything there.
All right, go ahead. When Ed became the head coach.
When Ed became the head coach, it was him and Joe Lutzy. Roger Pelko was the guy that was kind of like the equipment guy, but was definitely a big part of that staff. And then he had a number of guys. He had Bill Druszczak, a number of ex-players. It became the norm and carried over into our tenure. But it became the norm to hire, Chaney guys. With Red and Joe kind of sharing the duties of coaching. In Pelco, as I said, they brought in Roger, and I already said Roger Pelco, but Bill Druszczak, Bob Wojtek, Bob Garkar, who was a teacher, and aside from Bob Wojtek, who was an Ursuline guy, all the other guys were Chaney guys. And then he had some other guys that maybe did one year or so. And then when I came on board, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of his right-hand men was John Kopp. A lot of the success that they were having, John was part of that staff. It was actually when Joe got out, he took over for Joe and started to run the defense. And then when Ed brought me on board, Bill Druszczak stepped aside, and who was a phenomenal coach and GA'd with me at Syracuse for a year, and he actually influenced me to call Ed and try to get on staff that following year. But anyway, when Bill got out and Joe Lutzy got out, John Kopp took over the defense, and as I said, Ed brought me in, and during that time, that 10-year period that I was on staff, there was Tim O'Malley and Tom Mager and Mike Dobrin, Lou Lowry,
Yeah.
Chris Venaple, so there was some guys that all made stops, so to speak, and contributed to the successes that we had. And then it was holdovers. When I became the head coach, I kept Dobe, and I kept your Uncle Red Saunders, who was a scout pretty much for Ed during the years. So Dobe and your Uncle Red and Tim O'Malley, Nick Ewinook were, and the Gesslers were the staff that first year.
So let's circle back. You were talking about a couple of things, and I didn't think about it till you mentioned it. How, and I know you can't speak personally to this, but how do you think, with only two coaches early on, 20s, 30s, 40s, those guys did it? Because you think about how specialized it is now, right? You got line coaches. Matter of fact, you got centers and guard coaches and then tackle coaches, and then you got a tight end coach. How do you think they managed all that? Let alone defense.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, and this is no disrespect to the game, this is no disrespect to the area or era, the game was simpler then. I mean, it was, if you were good at teaching blocking and tackling,
Yeah.
and the nuances of offensive football were, if you could throw and the faking stages. Okay, so.
So you, that's probably why it was simpler, because there was less guys coaching singularity.
Sure.
And it was probably on offensively, if you had a scheme right up front, gap on backer, you had rules to where you could teach that and maybe not have.
5 keys.
Right. Yeah. So that would be very difficult. And then defensively, if you were gap sound, and
Yeah, and if you think about what they were running, I mean, Newt Rockne, big innovation was the shift and some motion and how the game evolved. If you look at how the game evolved, and there's an adage that's been throughout coaching, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and we got away from that. I mean, because we certainly got away from that. Over the years, it became, well, let's be more and more intricate, and to defend that, you had to become more and more intricate. So,
well, if you think about it, how easy would it be? And there were times where I'd see you, and I know you've told stories, and guys who listen to this podcast remember it, where you stand on the sideline and you go this, 4,
yeah,
or you go 5.
yeah, that's the KISS principle, absolutely. But
that doesn't always work if you're not.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct, and it does come down to obviously personnel. If you got the personnel to be able to say 4 and 5, and get that first down or that score,
Sure.
then good for you. But adjustments occur, and you have to go with the flow more or less. And like I said, you're talking about being gap sound on defense. So what were the early defense? 88 gap, okay? They're putting 8 guys on the line of scrimmage and, get in the backfield and make a play, and you 3 guys in the back, don't let anybody run past you.
Do you think that, just guessing, do you think that it was probably similar in terms of you had 1 or 2 guys coaching at each high school team, or was it like today, for lack of a better term, it's always an arms race? If you got 2, I got to get 3, and then I got 3, so you got to get 4.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think arms race is a great analogy. That's exactly what happened. And as a head coach, it's almost like more is better. I mean, we'll
Sure.
find a spot for you.
Sure, yeah, sure.
You
Right.
want to come on board, you want to volunteer your time, heck, we'll find a spot for you. I'll give you the tight ends, or I'll give you the corners, or I'll give you the safeties, whatever. So yeah, I think that's what it's evolved. And you see some of these staffs, they got 10, 15 guys.
Well, I want to come back to that later, at some later here with volunteers and just guys. So were a lot of those early guys, even up to Red, Ed, do you think that they had were there stipends or contracts, or were they, I would assume probably a lot of them were either teachers or community guys, and how was that set up?
Well, how it was initially was that the head coach was a contract, and he was allotted. I'm talking about when Red was there, his 2 assistants, he was allotted 2 assistants, and I
Okay.
think it raised to 3.
Okay.
3 supplements. So he was allotted 3 on the varsity level.
And so, for people who don't know, supplements are just paid contracts. You get paid to coach.
Yes. Yes. And the head coach got a percentage, and the assistant coaches got like a half of that percentage. And and then there was a job description and duties and whatever that those respective positions were responsible for. I want to say during our tenure that it evolved in. Before that, there was always guys that would volunteer, and it was not an issue. You didn't need certification.
Right.
You didn't need CPR and coaching certification. So if you were an alum or just a fan that had some experience, either as a player or as a coach, maybe you coached on the younger kids, the parochial league or one of the feeder type things, and you wanted to volunteer your time, sure, we'd love to have you. And I don't know how much. Well, I shouldn't say that, because it was a given during Red's tenure that if you were away at school and you came back during the summer when they were conditioning, you'd help. I mean, Red would use you. There were times go take the the running backs on the other side of the track, okay, and put them through. And all the guys that came back would get their jollies on that. I mean, they'd go and say, "Hey, we used to work like crazy, and that's how you're going to work, okay?" And
It wasn't always good jollies. They probably
exactly. So it got to a point where, well, let's see, how hard I could work them.
Right, exactly.
And so. But I guess on the other hand, there were probably guys that the kids would see, because I remember as a player there, oh, so-and-so is going to work us out today. Well, it won't be as bad as somebody else, or it won't be as bad as Red watching us.
Right.
But in any event, that occurred under Red's tenure, and the same with Ed. Ed, guys. I know Marty Gaudios, who was a player for Red and well, actually up until Red's last year, he helped Ed for a while, but when we came in, the same thing. We had that nucleus of paid coaches, and when I started in '87, I had Mike Dobrin and Red Saunders, and I think Tim O'Malley and Nick Ewinook each had a contract. And I want to say one of those was as like an equipment guy. You were allowed to hire an equipment guy. And the Gesslers were like the ninth grade. Jeff was a varsity coach. So it could have very easily been 4 coaches that were paid.
Okay.
And anybody else would, if you could get something from your gridiron club, or if you could, or they'd volunteer. And that went through the first couple years, and then guys start, when we started to have some success, there were always guys that were loyal. I mean, that were pro program and wanted to do whatever they could to help. But I think you needed to be not I think, but you needed to be somewhat selective on who you would bring in. I mean, you just well, so and so is a good player. He wants to help. Okay, come on. I mean, you had to have a feel for what they were bringing to the table, so to speak. So we ended up, guys like Doe left because of his kids, and to coach his kids, and Red was back and winding down his involvement. So we brought guys like Jim Hareholtz, who's a superintendent now, and the Sambrone brothers, both great Chaney players, and Will Bagnola, who was the head of the teachers union. I don't think at the time, but he coached for us for a while. And the Bellish brothers, Dennis and Gary Bellish, but all the guys that made stops, if you would, at one time or another, and I'm talking about Mike Capizzello and Gary Vivacqua, Todd Del Baccio, Bruce Palmer, George Wallison, Robbie Sylvester, all ex-players, for the most part, and guys that came and just wanted to help.
So you probably had a lot of guys that were either just out of high school, just playing for your college, or maybe they were kind of in school, wanted to still be part of it, wanted to still have that connection. That's kind of what it seems like. And then, maybe they get a different career, and that schedule doesn't fit with the practice schedule or the time commitment, or family commitments. Would you say that most of your long-term guys were probably in the education profession just because it fit, or did you find that not to be the case?
That is the case, and that became what I consider the nucleus of a really solid bond coaching staff that produced a lot of success, and that involved certainly Mike Popio, Alan Mikovich, Bill Miller, Dallas Saunders, yourself, Dan Cipriano, and you could probably help me if I'm missing someone, but
I know Zielinski was on.
Steve Zielinski
was on when I came.
Yeah, and I have him down in my notes. Roy Guy made a three-year stop and was a major contributor.
Yeah, he came back, moved back to the area, and went back to school to become a teacher.
Absolutely, yeah. He called me from New Hampshire and said, I'll start whatever, ninth grade, eighth grade, whatever you have open. This is what I want to do, and he became a really great asset and help for us. But that core, and then in 2000, Mike Zord, guys would come back for our camp. But as far as, and guys would come back and demo things during practice. whether it was doubles or whatever, Mike Zordich. And then one year we had, in 2000, which, was a great year, we had Jerry O coaching with us. And, what a great asset he was. I mean, and not only from the standpoint of the kids seeing all the successes that he had, but his actual coaching ability. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was you think, oh, here's an NFL linebacker, but he knew it all.
I actually had to tone him down sometimes. I mean, just say, Coach, we just don't have the time to get maybe that NFL detail.
Yeah.
I mean, and he just doing what he knew.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
and you're running out of time to get things in, and when I say tone him down, I don't mean that I had to sit him down and give him a talking to. It was just a suggestion.
Yeah.
But he was great. I mean, it was not only was it a great year for us, but it was a great experience for all of us on the staff. Just to have him around and whether it was coaching a position or being a get back guy.
Yeah, it was entertaining. I'll tell you that for sure. So through the years, how did you keep the staff together? How did different guys leave, come and go? Just the makeup of, you were on. You've been an assistant coach, so you've seen that. What was it like being an assistant for somebody on a staff and replacing guys, and then what did you kind of take from that to building your own staff? And you've talked about not just maybe watching Ed, but you've coached in college, you've coached at Camel, you've been different places. How did you prepare yourself to start building your own staff?
Well, it's really a tough situation. I found anyway in coaching because you want to constantly push your guys, the guys that are coaching with you, to get their own program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, to become a head coach, if they've indicated that that's what they want to do someday. So you promote that, and in promoting that, you're kind of contributing to attrition.
Mm-hmm.
So guys would come to me, yourself included, and say, I'm thinking about this, or do you think I'm ready? And I would say, I think you got to be totally unselfish in that area. And I'd say, do you think you're ready? And if you are, I'll do whatever I can do to help you. And I'm telling you that sometimes that's not a whole lot. I mean, in case in point was, I kind of, I don't want to say groomed, that's not the right word, but I wanted Alan Mikovich to take over when I retired.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, and went to the board and asked the board at a meeting, and they went in a different direction.
Yeah.
And
That's probably a whole nother conversation.
It certainly is another conversation, and I don't particularly want to go down that road, but
but you, as circle back to one of the first episodes that we did, and one of the first questions I asked you about you taking over was, 4 head coaches in 80 years. It seems like this is a position that is, for lack of a better term, granted, right? Because of what has been done, what has been, like you said, groomed. That's probably how it should have been. But and not to go down that road, but that kind of circles back to your thought process in that.
yeah, exactly, and obviously what was used as the biggest reason, and speaking of Jerry O spoke and said, if the rule is that a teacher, and Mick wasn't a teacher at the time, has to have first preference to the position, are you telling me that as an all-state player at Chaney and a college All-American and an NFL player that I couldn't be considered because I'm not a teacher if I wanted to apply for this job? And the answer was, well, yeah, that's.
Well, I know, yeah. If you want something bad enough, there's always a way to make it happen.
Right, exactly. But yeah, the you want your guys to move on, and when you think about it, our guys, you going getting the Struthers job, and Mick getting the Jackson Milton job, Mills getting the Salem job. Pope should have been able to get whatever job that was out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you're going down that road. Capacci. Mike Capacci was on staff. Obviously, Paul Lamongi.
Right.
So that's 3, 4. That's 5.
Those are 2 guys that I didn't get to, but yeah, Mike Capacci at Western Reserve, had great success there, and then moved to Newark.
Salem, playoff team at Salem, yeah. I mean, so yeah, a lot of success.
Yeah. Paul Lamongi state championship out in Omaha, and is currently undefeated.
Is he?
And before I continue, I would certainly be remiss if I didn't shout out to Chaney moving to 7-1. Congratulations to Coach Antrim and staff and Cowboys on a great start, and hopefully they'll finish 9-1, load up, and make some serious noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. They're having a great year.
We had 5, 6 head coaches. You can't discount Jerry O, being coach in the NFL, and Mike Zordich being.
Was Bruce Palmer a head coach?
Bruce Palmer was a head coach at Campbell. Yes.
Okay. I thought he for a short time.
Yes.
And he coached. He was a coach with
I'll
you.
give you a real quick anecdote on Bruce Palmer.
Okay.
When he first came, he was YPD, coming off of a serious incident where he was shot 3 or 4 times in a drug raid. Okay, and he was on death's door and bounced back, but back and was in a squad car and coaching for us at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was living on the west side on Christine Lane, actually. And my wife and I heard something on the front porch, and I told her to call the 911, and I got a bat and went out on the porch, and it was probably some kids that were just, ding dong ditching or
Yeah.
something, and because I could hear scampering down the street as I went out, but as I ran down the driveway with a bat in my hand, a cruiser come flying around the bend with the siren on and lights flashing, and it was Bruce. He was on the other side of town and heard the 911 call over dispatch, and heard that it was my residence, and he was there. He was there that fast. But yeah, Bruce was a good addition to the staff, and you're right. He did have a tenure at Camo. Actually, the year that they had, he had a pretty good year. They were
Yeah.
down for a while, and he had me speak at their banquet.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6. Another one that should have, could have, at any point. I mean, that's 7 guys, on your staff over the years. Who have gone on to run their own program. I mean, I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and absolutely, and was there a sadness, if you will, with them, with each one of them leaving? Absolutely, but I think anybody that is in a position as a head coach would want to see their
Yeah.
guys succeed. Yeah, I mean, you look at it. Mills is still coaching. Pope's still coaching. Jeff Gessler's still coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Capacci is.
I think he's doing baseball,
He
but
does-
still coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, to fill those spots, not that you can ever fill the void that's left, but, we brought in Andy Ball and Matt Graneri,
Mm-hmm.
who's still coaching at
Yeah.
Ursuline. And Steve Satchery was, ran our 9th grade program for a number of years. And Roger Gasser,
Yeah.
was coaching on the small college level.
Yeah, I don't know where he's at now, but
And which, those are all the coaches. And then we had tremendous support groups, people that were really, really involved above and beyond just being boosters. Certainly a guy that I consider as part of our staff for 3/4 of the tenure was Doc DiDomenico.
Oh, yeah.
And Randy Bryan was
Yes.
the trainer, but Doc was just, went to every game, and just was unbelievably giving in his time, in his commitment to the program.
how did you get hooked up with him?
Actually, he sent one of his partners down on the practice field in the middle of the day and say, "Hey, you guys, Ohio Sport and Spine wants to get involved in the training."
Yeah, the training
part,
aspect. Yeah.
training aspect, and we'll provide a trainer a couple times a week, and at no cost to you. They just trying to get their foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought him in, and the rest is, and I gotta say this: all this attention that is being brought about, what is it, CTE, the concussion protocol?
Yeah.
Okay, Doc started this. This was going on back in.
Well, in the 2000s, early 2000s, they were doing the
Late
concussion
90s,
tests,
I
yeah.
want to say.
Yeah.
I want to say the late 90s, where I didn't have, Doc was screening kids and putting them through the testing part of it during doubles, and during games, if somebody got dinged and they didn't pass the protocol, I didn't have them.
Yeah.
There were games that we lost that that maybe coaches would be.
It was Doc's fault.
Yeah, that would have been a convenient blame, But no, and I'm here to tell you that I believe that he saved a lot of kids, because as a coach, you okay? Yeah, okay. How many fingers I got up, and go ahead back in. But when you got a guy that's a professional and that's dealing and knows what's up.
As a player, you always felt like, and this sounds bad, you always felt like it was your job to do everything to get back in. If that's fibbing on a test, as a player.
How many headshots did you? I'm telling you, why I search for words now is probably
Right.
because years and years of but we were hitting with our head.
Right.
You were.
Did you
hitting
wear
with your
leather
face.
helmets?
We believe it or not, we had face masks, and I actually had
That was
a
my next
bar
question.
and bull rings.
Oh. Wow, you're
and-
cutting edge.
Now, I also tell you that Joe Lutzy would look at that and say, "That's a crutch."
Well, I remember and you even hate to say it with the context of stuff, but the common joke was, in practice when you'd have a big hit, it'd be like, "Hey, somebody get the phone, answer that phone because his bell's rung." So knowledge, education, having a doctor to say, "Hey, no, it's not okay, so-and-so can't go back in." That was a huge deal 20 some years ago.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.